Hi, Luis.
Hello, Ananda. How are you?
Oh, I was not hearing anything, so I was wondering if things have started.
Hi, Ananda. Not yet.
Hi, Henriette. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very good. It's raining heavily now.
And it's not cold, at least. Here we have
It's,
such cold weather and it rains as well, which
it's,
normally it doesn't in the winter.
it's not cold, but the power has gone just now. So I have some backup power. Let's see how much it will withstand for the Wi-Fi.
That's been one good thing for us here. We had lots of power failures, but since lockdown, we haven't.
Oh,
It has
That's
reduced
good.
the demand. Yeah, it's a good consequence.
That's good.
And we haven't had either scheduled power outages or unscheduled.
Oh, lovely. Our problem here is if this is the hurricane season, and we do get problems with electricity during the hurricane season. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
mine is already gone. I'm with the power backup.
Ananda, what do you use for power backup? Do you use a generator or a UPS, or how do you do it?
We have not the UP. Yeah, it's what is that called? Inverter.
An inverter.
Inverter.
I don't know what we've got.
Hi, Chemek.
Hi, Henriette. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
And Chemek, thank you very much for, I'll announce it formally when we open, but thanks very much for staying with us.
It's a pleasure,
for
Henriette,
IGF
really.
2020.
It's a pleasure, really, believe me. We are really, very fond of, and we would really like to support the IGF community and the Secretariat and the MAG, of course, in your efforts to make the IGF 2020 well, best virtual IGF ever.
Good. I hope it is the best.
It will be.
Ever.
It will be.
Hopefully the first ever.
We will manage.
Okay, so I think we can get
2 minutes. The 2 minute
Shagatai
mark.
Ah,
to
yes,
please.
2 minutes, Shingatai. Hello.
2-minute Shagatai. Shagatai, 2-minute.
Hi, Shemek, how are you?
Fine, thank you. We have storm at the moment in Warsaw.
Oh, yes, it was raining like crazy here about an hour ago. It really like torrential tropical rain. Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, here too.
So, yeah. But Henriette said that you have a cold winter, right?
Yes, Chemek, we have. And I have very mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, it's not very nice, but winters used to be very cold here. And then with global warming, they've become less cold. So in a way, I feel it's quite good, that at least we are back to what should be the patterns here, because Johannesburg is high altitude. We are nearly 2,000 meters above sea level. So it can get very cold by our standards. When I say very cold, at night it goes down to about -2, -3. And then in the day it can go up to 20, but at the moment it's probably about 7, which is cold, 7 or 8. It's cold for us.
Okay. Well, definitely. If you have an average temperature of 20 and you have 7, so yeah, definitely.
And if you
much
have
too cold.
experience of living in past British colonies, you will know that the buildings are often built in such a way that it's colder inside than outside.
I see. Well, hopefully, anyway, it will. Maybe it will be, maybe it will get warmer. Hopefully.
No, it will. It will. And once the sun is shining, it gets very warm. It's just that when there is no sun, it gets very cold. So, Shangatai, are you ready?
Yes, I think we should start. So, good afternoon, evening, and morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first day of the MAG meeting. for the IGF 2020, for the June set of meetings. Thank you all for being with us. And just a few things that we have to say before the meeting. The meeting is being recorded and also live streamed on YouTube. There is a transcript and there's a link to those transcripts on the front page of the IGF website. So please feel free to go there and get those links. There is no interpretation today, but that's fine. I think we can all understand each other. And I'd also like to say thank you very much to the government of Poland for providing it during the Open Consultation Day. If you would like to take the floor, could you please use the speaking queue? If there's a technical problem and you cannot use the speaking queue, just put your name in the chat and somebody from the secretariat will put your name in the speaking queue, and you could easily see where you are in the speaking queue by looking at the screen or going to the website link. Once the chair will call your name, if you are, when she calls you to the floor, can you please say your name slowly and also your affiliation. Once you've spoken, could you please make sure that your microphone is off, and also please make sure that your microphone is off at all times if you're not speaking. We had a couple of on mics yesterday, and it's very, very distracting to the speakers. Also, could you please, when you speak at a measured space, not too slow and not too fast, so that people whose English is not their first language or maybe their second or third language can understand you, and also the transcription can get you properly. I think I have said everything. If not, Henriette will fill in the things that I have not said. Over to you, Henriette, please, to the chair to open up the meeting.
Thank you very much for that, Shengatai. And congratulations to you and your team for having prepared well. And I think we had a good open consultation, but we'll get to that later.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to all the MAG members, welcome to observers, and welcome to our captioners, who I wonder where they are and what time it is, somewhere in the US. And thanks again to ICANN for making that possible. I'll do a quick review of the agenda and then we can get going. So today we have until 1:15 UTC. So for the next 45 minutes, we're just going to review the agenda, and we'll do a debrief on the open consultations. We really just want to get a sense of how it went and what we should factor into our planning for IGF 2020. By the way, if you note, we've got the annotated agenda on screen. And just a reminder here that we'd like all the MAG members to rename themselves on Zoom, just so that we know which group we can put you in, because we've assigned you, or you've assigned yourselves to workshop evaluation groups. And it's easier for Luis to cluster you into breakout groups if your name indicates which group you're part of. Our next session will be a breakout session. But it's an informal social breakout session. It's only 15 minutes. We'll randomly put all the meeting participants, MAG members and others, into breakout groups. And you can really talk about anything. You can talk about a virtual IGF if you want, but it's just a good time to connect with one another. And I think my only request is that when you when you greet one another, just tell one another where you are dialing into from the meeting, just to give us a bit of a sense of the spread of the MAG and where all the MAG members are. Some are at home, some are not at home. So that's really the only requirement. And like on the first day of the open consultation, this will be automated. You'll be automatically randomly clustered. We'll have fewer groups this time. And when your time is up, you'll be automatically sent back to plenary. Then we have a MAG plenary session where we have the workshop evaluation groups report their work. We've added a little bit more detail to the annotated agenda in response to I think what seemed to me popular demand for more parameters, but we'll discuss that later when we get to that. So we'll have a plenary discussion. After that plenary discussion, the workshop evaluation groups, they'll do their reports, but then we'll break out, and based on the discussion of those reports in plenary, the same groups will revisit their initial recommendations and affirm those. So I won't go into more detail. We can go through the detail at the beginning of each session. And that essentially is really the agenda for today. We've put an optional task for that breakout session. Should you have the time and should you feel that way inclined, please do talk about some of your preferences for a virtual IGF. But I don't want you to be distracted by planning and designing a virtual IGF. You know, the primary task of this MAG meeting is for us to finalize our workshop selection and also to look at the overall program, the design and the main sessions. We might have to adjust that based on the virtual IGF, but I don't think we should not meet our primary objectives of the meeting. But if there's time, if you want to discuss virtual IGF parameters in your breakout group. And that is really it. And we are asking those that are still awake and able to be with us to come back for a very short closing plenary. The groups are not required to report back. We've given the facilitators and the moderators time to do that. We'll report back tomorrow. So that's really just getting together quickly, making sure we're all on track and clarifying what the next steps are for tomorrow. So that is it. Any questions or comments on the agenda? I don't see any. So on that note, I declare the meeting open. So let's look back at yesterday. So I want to start by thanking the MAG members. I felt that you had a very good, I was very comfortable with the balance of MAG members being in listening mode, but then participating, particularly when there were gaps in the discussion, because that's very important. So I think, you know, there is, we need to sit back and listen, but also we need to participate. And I was very happy with the balance. Shanghai and the Secretariat have prepared a short summary for us of highlights of input that was received. But before we look at those, are there any general reactions on the open consultation that anybody wants to share? And I did someone ask for the floor? I saw there was a name that appeared and disappeared. Did I miss someone? No. Louise, I assume no. So yes, anybody who want to share some general reflections on the open consultation days? Jutta, please go ahead.
Thank you, Henriette, for giving me the floor. I just wanted to say very briefly that I do think we had an excellent open consultation session over the last 2 days, and it makes me very much looking forward to also having a virtual IGF. I was a bit reluctant to when the announcement came that we would have a virtual only IGF in November, but after these 2 days with so many people engaged in the debate and also with high level participation, I really did appreciate also the session yesterday in the afternoon with Under Secretary General Fabrizio Hochschild. So this makes me very confident that we can cope with the situation and that we will have a very good IGF also. It's virtual. And thank you for making this possible, because I do think it's really a joint effort. It needs all that we can put into that exercise, and I'm really happy to continue with that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jutta. Yes, I also felt encouraged by that. And I have to apologize. It was an error in my judgment when we planned the agenda. I should have allocated much more time to the Q&A with Fabrizio. I didn't anticipate that there would be so much interest in that. Salihu, please introduce yourself for the record. Salihu, I assume you are an observer and that your mic is muted, am I right?
Hello, Henriette. Sorry, this is Luis. We cannot unmute him. Probably there is a momentary issue in his side. Let's try to, or her side, sorry.
Salihu, we can't hear you right now, but please, you can type your comment in the chat. I don't see anyone else asking for the floor at this point. There are a few comments in the chat. I do really want to encourage MAG members to speak today rather than use the chat. We're not a huge group, and it's a good opportunity for us to hear one another's voices. Salihu, I hope you can type, but Shangatai, if you are ready, let's look at your summary of the takeaways from the open consultation, particularly those that are relevant to the planning of IGF 2020. And then hopefully MAG members will have more to share. So Shangatai, can you take the floor, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, Henriette. I would just like to mention as well that the summary was also produced with the help of Samantha Dickinson, who is working at the Secretariat as the communications consultant. I think she's the only one whose name has not been mentioned over the past couple of days. So just to mention her. So for the summary, this is what we derived as relevant for the MAG discussions. So the four thematic areas, that is trust, data, environment, and inclusion, are still relevant for the IGF 2020. I think that was underlined, and nobody disagreed with that. And there was a suggestion to have a main session on the digital corporation roadmap linked to the 2025 renewal of the IGF and the WSIS plus 20 meetings that will be going on then. And there was a suggestion as well that we should keep the music night. We can have a virtual music night. We have over 40 people registered for it. So we can do something in the lines that has been happening on YouTube, etc., over the pandemic when everybody was at home. Also, there was a strong sentiment to maintain the youth track. And there was a request for the IGF to make sure that gender-based violence is discussed somewhere in the program. And I think that was answered, that it will be particularly addressed with the BPF on gender. And also there's a sprinkling of that also during the workshops as well. Many hold that a high-level session for ministers later than originally scheduled in the IGF week, so that there'll be more clarity about the IGF plus model. So we should hold the high-level sessions later on than previously, because previously they started the IGF. We used to have the high-level sessions on the Sunday and Monday. So there's a suggestion that we have them at the end of the meetings. Then there was becoming an online event means that some agility can be built into the program. A session on emerging issues can be added where people can share information about what is emerging in their country or region. ISOC also proposed to cooperate with the MAG on hosting a track of sessions dedicated to local case studies on emerging issues. And this modality should be agreed on between ISOC and the MAG, and also, of course, other stakeholders in general, if they have views on that. As was mentioned, the Undersecretary General of UNDESA, Mr. Liu, also joined us and gave us a address. And the part of the contents of his address was that the IGF is currently halfway through its 10-year mandate given to it by the UN General Assembly in 2015. And it will be up to the United Nations General Assembly to renew and update its mandate again in 2025. The Undersecretary General also mentioned that on Monday, he submitted a note to the UN Secretary General outlining how UNDESA is going to follow up on his roadmap in enhancing the IGF in collaboration with all stakeholders, including with the MAG members. Mr. Liu also noted there's much more to be done, including better integrating intersessional work, enhancing the visibility of the IGF, addressing its long-term sustainability and resources necessary for increased participation of stakeholders, especially those from developing countries. The USG invited MAG members and interested stakeholders to work with us and come up with concrete solutions for a stronger IGF. And as you know, yesterday we had the Q&A on the Digital Cooperation Roadmap and the IGF Plus. And this was started by the Undersecretary General, Mr. Fabricio Hochschild, Special Advisor to the Secretary General. And he explained the UN Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation, recognized that technology is too fast moving and there is little appetite among UN member states for new conventions or new UN bodies. So the report tries to work with what already exists and strengthen these existing bodies and organizations by making them more inclusive and outcome oriented. And this also included the IGF Plus. For the recommendation 5A and 5B, the consultations have shown wide support for the multi-stakeholder cooperative model and also wide support for the IGF Plus model. In the consultations, many people have called for a clearer agenda setting at the IGF, a leaner agenda, and a better interaction between the discussions going on in the IGF and the discussions being taken elsewhere, a linking mechanism of sorts. There's also been suggestions to have a mechanism to coordinate follow-up actions on the IGF discussions and link them to the appropriate normative and decision-making forums. There were suggestions to have a more focused IGF agenda based on a limited number of strategic policy issues. Stronger links among the Global Forum and its regional, national, and sub-regional and youth initiatives was also encouraged. Integrating program and intersessional policy development work to support the priority areas was also one point that was noted. The roadmap says the Secretary General will create a strategic and empowered high-level body building on the experience of the MAG. This body will not replace the MAG, but aims to better connect global leaders, global opinion makers on the digital policy issues that are increasingly important in today's world. The NRI survey also showed a lot of support for having the future IGF Plus be able to make recommendations, as well as for closer integration between the national and regional initiatives and the IGF. Also, that some of the functions suggested for an IGF Plus could perhaps be better performed at a more localized or regional level. Timelines for implementation of the roadmap have yet to be mapped out. And during the open consultations, it was noted that it's important to consider how to evolve the best practice forums in the context of IGF+. And that's the end of the summary. Thank you, Henriette. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Netai, and thanks a lot to Sam and for pointing out that we haven't thanked her yet. Sam, thanks so much for your summaries and for your work on the newsletter, and it's very good to have you with us as one of the team. Any reflections or any comments on these highlights? We've got a few more minutes, so I think this is a good opportunity for us to have general discussion, particularly on the roadmap for digital cooperation, and also input received on the virtual IGF. I think the inputs received on thematic content we can revisit later when we get to the main sessions in particular. And just for the record, everyone, so that you understand, our protocol for MAG meetings is that we give MAG members the floor first if they've requested it, and observers after. But if there are no MAG members in the queue, we will, provided that time allows, we give the floor to observers as well. So, Sanio, have you managed to sort out your microphone?
Hi, Henriette, this is Luis. It doesn't seem so. Sorry.
And Sylvia, you say that you can't load the speaking queue. Do you want to, are you requesting the floor? Okay, Sylvia, you have the floor.
Thanks, Henriette. Sorry, lost control of my keyboard. My apologies. Yes, thank you very much, Henriette, for giving me the floor. I wanted to echo the comments of about how great the exchange with the Undersecretary General was, that he answered almost all the questions, the difficult ones straight on. So that was really interesting. I just wanted to pick up on some comments that Maria Paz made on the chat yesterday about trying to figure out how some of those mechanisms will work, and the opportunity for the MAC to provide input as a group to those options that may come up on the paper. I think it's great that Hannah and Rudolf are working on that piece, but it is a little bit weird, honestly, to have some MAC members involved and actively participating, and others not knowing really what's going on, and because in the end those decisions will affect not us, that like me on our last year on the MAC, but it will affect the future of the IGF and a lot of the things that we have built. So it will be very interesting to see what mechanisms that are possible to get a little bit more understanding of what is the thinking behind, and to see how can we get behind it and support it and provide our expertise to the process. There is simple things like that they seem to be kind of overlooked a little bit on the panel's report and on the roadmap, that may have been discussed as part of their own process, about simple definitions, right? So, for example, what they really mean by digital cooperation, to what organizations or platforms or alliances or structures are they referring to when they criticize those platforms. I think that's important to know, because you can assume things that are actually not there. So I appreciate very much the the resources that Jorge shared earlier today, that Diplo put together a video where you can read the report with an expert and see the annotated copy of the report. That's a good insight for those of us that have only contributed to one of the recommendations. So yeah, I think there is a lot of work to be done, and there is a lot of expertise on this MAC and the past members of the MAC, and it would be really good to find ways so that, for example, all the work that the working group on IGF improvement did on that massive spreadsheet that had documented everything that was suggested in the past, and keeping track of all of that work that unfortunately we haven't been able to maintain as far as I know. So it is, there is a lot of work there, and I just don't want to pretend that all the new things are going to be shiny and better. And as Maria Paz mentioned yesterday, that the ways that we have now are for some reason obscure and bad and whatever. So you just need a little bit more of context, I guess, and to digest that information and try to figure out the way forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Maria Paz.
I'm here. Okay.
Please activate your camera if you can.
Yeah, I did it. Can you see me? Can you hear me and see me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for Sylvia that quoted some of my comments yesterday. I just want to add a little bit on top of that to what she just have mentioned. It's not only also about how the MAC can input with experience, which is very relevant, and I want to make very clear, especially because Rudolf and Hannah are part of this group, that I really commend and appreciate the effort that the group has been doing for reaching people through the consultation. And I know that we as MAC members had opportunity also to input in that process if we had enough time for participating in these different opportunities of commenting, that they have been working very hardly and very well for constructing. But beside that, there is really good effort in trying to reach more diversity of opinion and participation. I think that is really relevant the way in which decisions will be made about the different options that arise from this consultation process and all the input that's being gathered. So I understand from the comments that they made yesterday, either speaking or in the chat, that they are not in the role of deciding what model or what option will be taken. And I understand that and I value that, but in some points, some decisions will be made. So to the point that Sylvia was mentioning, referring the discussion yesterday, I think that this concept of that everything that is existent is being processed and made in an obscure way that is not clear for people outside the groups, I don't see how that could be better if in this case the decision-making process it's not totally clear. Who will take part of that, what will be the following criteria, because of course it's very relevant to gather different opinions, but later, as Christiane was mentioning yesterday in the chat, and I totally agree with her, there is a need of consensus to move forward whatever final decision is made in the subject. So I really want to highlight that, because if all the purpose of proposing new structures and new modalities of engagement was providing more opportunity of transparency and diversity and all that, I think that this is a critical point that should be given attention in order to ensure that, and not just reread the process that MAC and other current structure have been working very hard for many years to bring that spirit of openness and participation and diversity. I will leave it there for now. I have comments about the virtual IGF, but I'm not sure if this is the moment. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Maria Paz. I don't see anyone else taking the floor, but perhaps Rudolf or Hannah, you want to comment. And I don't think that we should put them under particular pressure because they are in the MAG. But I think something for the MAG to consider is whether there shouldn't be an IGF MAG 2020 response to the roadmap. I think that's something for you to consider. I don't see any reason why it might not be helpful for the MAG to draft such a response. And then I think just the second thing I would caution about is, digital cooperation and the architecture of what will become the architecture of digital cooperation is not just the IGF. And I think it's the IGF plus, but IGF plus starts with the IGF. So I think that we need to respond, absolutely, and there are really important opportunities for us to respond to. But I don't think we should feel that as the IGF, we need to undertake the entire burden of what is required to have an effective digital cooperation architecture. But at the same time, I completely support your points, Maria Paz and Sylvia, about we do need to try and make an intervention to prevent, how can I say it, in allocation of energy and resources that is not cost effective, that is not actually going to add value to incrementally to work that has been done in the past and to what exists. But I would ask you, this is a question from me to you as the MAG, would you like to develop a response? I hear no voices. I see no hands. Rudolf and Hannah, are you willing to share some reflections at this point?
There's some comments in the chat.
Okay. Can you read them for us? Although I would really appreciate it if MAG members could take the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Rudolf?
Yes, we can hear you, Rudolf. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we have to, as I said yesterday, we have to be aware of the fact that we are at the beginning, in the middle, or at the beginning of a long-term process, and there are some, I would say, major questions that will be addressed during this process, and one of the, in my view, most major questions will be multi-stakeholderism versus multilateralism, or combination of both in the common architecture of the future. And I think there are tendencies within the membership of the United Nations to go more towards multilateralism than in the past, and there are arguments for that. At the same time, I think we must not lose the advantages and the good functioning system of multi-stakeholderism. And this is why I think the MAG could play a role, or could make a difference when responding. I mean, I wouldn't call it formally a response, but I think the MAG should continuously stay engaged in this endeavor of shaping the internet governance structures of the future. So, and at the same time, Henriette, I completely agree with you. We should not ourselves be inefficient and do double work in, taking the whole roadmap, every aspect of it, and adding to it. I think that will be also too huge of a task for us. So this is why I think we should concentrate on perhaps the structural questions, and then and perhaps one other question, like, I don't know, whatever, inclusion or connectivity, or I don't know. So one more structural and one more question on the substance, and have some ideas. I wouldn't call it a formal response, but to feed in the ideas of the MAG into the process, not only because they are very good ideas and very valuable contributions, but also to make the voice of the multi-stakeholder system continuously be heard in this process. I think that's of some critical importance that goes beyond the content of what is going to be said. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Rudolf. Ben, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll keep it short because I'm just warming up. I think what I'm going to say tallies with what Rudolf ended with just there, but I'm not sure. I think the important thing would be for the MAG to find space during the annual meeting for the community to discuss the roadmap, and particularly how it relates to the IGF and it being enhanced and transitioned to an IGF plus. So I think that should be the main contribution of the MAG. I'm not particularly, I don't think it's particularly important for the MAG itself to try and come to a view, rather for us to facilitate discussion within the IGF community as a kind of contribution to that, bringing in the multi-stakeholder views on how to move to an IGF plus. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Before I give the floor to Ananda, I think I do see in the chat there are some responses for some support for a MAG response. So I don't think that we should look at these as mutually exclusive. Absolutely agree with you. We have to facilitate discussion of this as part of the IGF 2020 program. But I think that, yes, maybe a response on structural factors, as Rudolf suggested, is also a good idea. I don't think we should see them as two mutually exclusive options, and I'm sure you didn't intend that. But you can come back to that later. Ananda, and then we have Susan, and then we have Paul. And I'm afraid I'm going to close the queue after Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Ananda Raj Khanal, government stakeholder from Nepal. When we are talking about IGF plus, it's very unfortunate, very sad to share with you that in the context of Nepal, IGF has not yet been in the agenda of the government. Now, so far, IGF is in the agenda of the civil society alone. Whatever they do is the activities pertaining to IGF. The government almost is unaware of the existence of IGF and the topics that we discuss here, and probably, so the discussion on IGF plus, I think countries like Nepal, I don't know about other the countries in the global south, but most of the countries, to my view, is not aware of the existence of IGF itself. So how can we make these countries on board so that IGF activities become the agenda of the government, and the huge repository of knowledge that we have created during the whole IGF processes can be better utilized in making internet-related policies. It's a very serious thought that United Nations should consider. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Ananda. And I think that's a very valid point. I see our speakers queue is continuing, but I'm going to have to close the queue after, okay, well, if you're all very brief, then we'll let everyone speak, including Alain, who's an observer. But please be brief, we're going to run over time. Go ahead. Susan, you are next.
Hi, my apologies, Henriette. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody. This is Susan Chalmers, MAG member from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration at the U.S. Department of Commerce. I will be brief. I do have some concerns about the prospect of the MAG as a whole drafting a response and coming to a consensus-based decision in response to the IGF plus proposal. And I think maybe we can enunciate, or I'd be happy to enunciate those concerns when we have more time. But I think that I do like Ben's idea of having a session to discuss this within the IGF program this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Remember, a response can be made up of questions. A response does not have to necessarily be a consensus view. It could just be commonly relevant, commonly agreed relevant questions. Paul, you have the floor.
Yes. Yes, hello. Can you hear me? Can
yes,
everybody hear me?
Can
Okay,
hear
good.
you and see you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to support the views that were just expressed by Susan and Ben as well. And I think Rudolph, to some extent, I think with the roadmap, obviously we're all very interested in it. And there's a lot at stake from the MEG and the IGF point of view. But some of us, and I think myself coming from the government of Canada, and maybe not just government representatives, are still coming to grips with the roadmap and formulating our own views on it. So I think it might be difficult then to engage in some kind of a negotiation and to try to reach an agreed upon MAG view. So therefore I would be more supportive of, I think what Ben was suggesting. Certainly we should be a platform for discussing the roadmap and we should feed into it. And I think Henriette, perhaps yours is a good suggestion as well, that we could formulate questions. Perhaps that's a good compromise. But I just wanted to sort of join others in sounding a note of caution about having a kind of negotiated MAG opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Absolutely. That's very important. Danko, you have the floor. Danko, we cannot hear you. Are you unmuted?
Can you hear me now? Yes.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. So two brief points. One, Serbia, the country that I'm coming from, is in Europe, but it's not a global south in geographical sense, but we are a developing country. And we also have a challenge that I, as a member of technical community, I'm in the MAG, but our government talks about digital transformation all the time, but doesn't actually recognize the existence of the internet or the processes that we are discussing here. So it's a global challenge. And the second point about reading through the roadmap, point 67, I see a recognition of the high complexity of the digital cooperation architecture today, and trying to find a simplified way. And in a way, I believe this is something that we should be very careful about, because when I read the organization that participated in creating the roadmap, I don't see much of the technical community represented. And I would say that internet is complex, but it works in part because it's complex and because it's so decentralized and delegated, and that we really need to be careful to observe the multi-stakeholder model and to include also the technical community, not to try to make simplified models that will actually break the internet. Thank you.
Thanks, Danko. Tamer, you have the floor.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Hello, can you hear me now?
we can hear you. And
Yes.
just a reminder, my apologies, I should have reminded everyone earlier, just introduce yourself for the record when you take the floor. Over to you.
Thank you, Henriette. My name is Timea Schütte. I work for the International Chamber of Commerce, and I'm a third-year MAG member for the business community. Just wanted to add my voice really quickly because I see we're running out of time. Wanted to add my voice to what was expressed earlier by Paul and Susan and Ben, and also by Rudolf. I wanted to really say that I'm sure that all of us are very, very interested in the report or in the roadmap, and we are looking forward to seeing how different stakeholders are mobilizing around it. But I also wanted to highlight that there is a process in place still that a lot of work is going into, that our colleagues Hannah and Rudolf are leading. And if we are thinking of any sort of response, we probably want to wait for that and to see how that complements what the Secretary General has outlined for the IGF Plus and anything else. But I also wanted to caution us away, if possible, from a negotiated MAG response per se, and rather to put us into a more active mode, if possible. And as Ben said, to have a session and also to think about how we can bring it into once the community has had a chance to discuss it, once the options paper is also out, and for us to think about how can we bring those recommendations into the processes of the IGF going forward. But I'm not sure providing a written response is the way. I think we should rather take it into reflection for us, discuss with the community and see how we can build on that for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Timea. Ale, do you have a brief response? I don't hear our observer taking the floor. So let's close on this. I think what I take away from this discussion is that we definitely do not. Oh, Ale, are you able to speak? Please introduce. We cannot hear you. Ale, we cannot hear you. I suggest that you type your comment in the chat, and then we can read it or see it. So to close this discussion, there's obviously a lot more discussion to come. There's definitely a consensus that we need to facilitate further discussion of the roadmap as we build IGF 2020's program. There's also, I think, agreement that we do not want to submit a negotiated position or consensus position of any kind as the MAG or from the MAG. But I think there's still an opening here for possibly the MAG responding with some questions. I will leave that to you to take further. What I suggest is that those of you who feel that it is worthwhile for the MAG to respond in some form, that you make a proposal of what shape that would take and what that would cover, taking into account the fact that we cannot present a negotiated position as the MAG, and we have many institutional and governmental representatives as well. So I'll leave that to you as MAG members to take further with the sensitivity of the context of the MAG to be taken into account. So I'm sorry I have to cut this short. We're running a little bit late. So at this point, no one should go offline because we're now going to join our informal, just catching up with one another, and you can discuss this or anything else freely as we break out into our, what did we call them? Our check-in breakout groups. So see some of you in the breakout groups. Louise, you can sort us into our groups.
Sure, thank you, Andrea. Just to confirm, 15 minutes?
Yes, I think we can stick to 15 minutes.
Okay,
we can
let's
afford running a little bit late. And I encourage people to switch on their mics and their cameras when they are in the breakout groups.
This automatic breakout rooms, engaging someone in breakout rooms and then automatic changeover to main session is very interesting feature of this Zoom. I never used. Luis?
Yes, I am here. I agree with you, Nebojsa.
Yeah. So where is that feature, by the way?
You have to be the host, and I think it's only for licensed Zooms.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it's only for licensed Zooms.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back from your break. I hope people had a good discussion. I was lucky to be with some very nice people, and we had a very nice discussion. So we are now back to MAG plenary, and this is really where we begin the substance of the work of the MAG. And I know you MAG members have been building up to this and have done a lot of preparatory work, even more than you would normally have done for the second MAG meeting. So we will now, I'll just give an overview of the purpose of this session. The purpose of this session is for us to get the recommendations from the workshop evaluation groups. So those MAG members that have looked at workshop proposals, clustered into the 4 themes, the 4 thematic tracks, and they've been evaluating them, making recommendations, decisions for mergers, what to keep, what not to keep, the red basket, the yellow basket, and the green basket, but also other recommendations that might have emerged, plus beginning to break these themes into sub-themes. The purpose of those sub-themes being that they can help us understand what is the scope of a thematic track and what should we try and aim for in terms of topical coverage in a thematic track. So I won't go on any longer at this point. I'd like to hand over to the facilitators, and thanks very much for all your hard work of these workshop evaluation groups. I also want to thank the workshop process working group for all the work that they've done to try and synthesize a way for us to have a common working methods in the different groups. So I'd like to take the groups in reverse alphabetical order. So I want to start with trust. Can we start with the feedback from the trust workshop evaluation group?
Thanks, Henriette, for keeping us on our toes there. There was me expecting we'd start with a D.
And just remember to introduce yourself again for the record.
Sorry, yes, good point. I am Ben Wallace with Microsoft for the record. So I'm going to, on behalf of both me and Sylvia, who led the trust evaluation group, I'm going to run through our recommendations. And we've got on the screen the Word document that I submitted, or it was a PDF with our recommendations. But I did also provide a single slide that put everything in one page. So if the Secretariat's able to put that up as well, or instead, that would be great. So the slide that's going to be put up shows the workshops that we propose within the structure that we propose for the trust track. The yellow, or when we get there, highlights, they denote the workshops that we propose be lifted from the yellow basket, and all the rest are from the green basket. So I'm going to run through our recommendations via an explanation of the 3-stage process we undertook. In the first stage, we allocated our 98 proposals to 3 baskets based on their score and their ranking, and that put about 30% of the proposals, all of which scored above 4, into the green basket. And then the bulk of this first stage was about analyzing the green basket to look at 2 things. First, to look at the structure of the track. Now in February, the trust working group developed a subthematic structure to help us think about the narrative and to organize the illustrative policy questions. So looking at the green basket proposals, we found that that structure pretty much stood up, but we did make a few small revisions. That included deleting an identity subtheme, which there were no proposals in the green basket, and also simplifying the titles of the remaining 5 subthemes. And then the second part of that first stage was to do a gap analysis. So we looked at the diversity data for the speakers of the green basket workshop proposals, and we identified that speakers from the Africa and GRULAC regions were particularly underrepresented compared to other regions, and that all stakeholder groups except for civil society were underrepresented. So the aim of stage 2 was for evaluation group members to suggest workshops in the yellow basket that could help to mitigate these gaps, these underrepresentations. And they could suggest either lifting a workshop up from yellow to the green basket, or identifying workshops which could be merged. And as per the guidance from the working group on workshop process, we did not consider for mergers any of the top 10% of proposals in our track. And the aim of stage 3 was then to discuss the suggestions from stage 2 and make final decisions. And this resulted in the recommendations that I submitted on Friday, and they can be summarized as 30 workshops in the green basket. These are ranked by the score they received, except for one adjustment that we made. We discovered that there was one workshop proposal that had been submitted twice. It was pretty much a duplicate. Now, as it turned out, you might remember the trust group was so big that we were divided into 2. So half of the trust track looked at the first 49 proposals and the other half looked at the other 49. As it happened, these duplicates were in both halves of our evaluation group. So we just combined the score. That changed the rank from 22nd in the track to 29th. So we adjusted the ranking there. We proposed lifting 6 workshops to the top of the yellow basket for inclusion in the program if space provides. We also explained the gaps that these proposals help to address, and we provided some recommendations for how the proposers could improve their workshop. And finally, we proposed one merger, and we made suggestions for how the merger could be achieved. But of course, given that one of the workshops we're proposing be merged was in the green basket, we note that this is only a recommended merger and that workshop number 341 is not required to merge, but is invited to merge with this workshop number 74 that otherwise wouldn't be taken forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Ben. Any questions for Ben or any additions from other members of this group? Susan, is that you wanting to add?
Hello?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to raise my hand. I apologize if I did.
No, you don't need to apologize.
Okay.
Just one question from me. So Ben, these what we see on the screen in front of us, those are the sub-themes you are proposing: cybersecurity, infrastructure, misinformation, media and democracy, digital sovereignty and internet fragmentation, and digital safety. Could you perhaps just say a little bit more about those sub-themes, how you see them, and how you came to agree on them?
Yes, so actually these were pretty much sub-themes that were developed back in February when the Trust Working Group was developing the narrative. And so obviously we had the narrative text, which is fairly high level, but does in its 2 paragraphs make an effort at highlighting all of the different elements of what we think can go into the trust track. And so this was, in the proposals which ended up in our green basket pretty much reflected what we thought would be a logical and comprehensive structure back in February. But as I said, we removed one of the sub-themes which didn't seem to attract any good proposals from the community. But otherwise, there's a fairly good balance in terms of numbers between them. I think it shows that misinformation is clearly a big topic this year, I think. And just going back to the start of my time with the MAG 2-3 years ago, cybersecurity might have been the biggest basket. And it's interesting to note, and it reflects our times, I think, that misinformation is such a big concern for the community, and there are a lot of ideas about how to tackle it, and the balance that needs to be struck between freedom of expression and protecting society from misinformation and disinformation. I don't know if that helps as an explanation.
Thanks a lot, Ben. And if I remember correctly, your green basket is 36. Am I right? Is that how many proposals you have in your green basket?
It depends how you want to describe the baskets, but we put 30 in the green basket and another 6 that we've lifted right to the top of the yellow basket. So we are proposing that those 36 be approved. You could say we've moved them into the green basket, or you could say they're the ones from the yellow basket we'd like added. I'm not sure exactly how you describe it, but 36 is the number. Yes.
Okay, I'm just taking note of that. Paul, you have the floor.
Thank you, Paul around here. I just wanted to get some clarity, and I guess this will pull through when we do our presentation for inclusion. I know that we hadn't determined the number of workshops that would be selected per theme, but I wasn't under the impression that it would be so high a number per track. So is this 36 based on a suggestion that all of these are accepted, or is this like a short list and out of that, whatever number would be selected? Yeah, just wondering, because it does have a bit of a material impact on our selections.
Ben, can you respond, please?
Can I respond to that?
Yes, go ahead, Sylvia. Just everyone,
thank you.
Use yourself when you take the mic.
Yes, this is Silvia Cadena, MAG member technical community. I did this work with Ben as co-facilitators and with the support of the two Trust 1 and Trust 2 working group to come up with these decisions or recommendations. So to answer your question, Paul, yes, this is our recommendation. The Trust track received 98 proposals. So the initial discussion on the working group for workshop evaluation was to allocate the number of proposals based on percentages, and we refer to those maximum numbers, and these recommendations are within that scope. So basically it was around the top 20-30% of each one of the tracks if you look at the initial calculations that Roberto included on the workshop evaluation guidelines on the annex. So we work based on that, and the proposals that you see on the screen, the ones that are not marked in yellow, they all are the higher score from 4 up. So they're only between the good and the excellent proposals. And we know that there is no decision in terms of numbers, but we agreed in principle with the working group on evaluation that it was going to be representative of the number of proposals received per track.
Thanks, Sylvia.
And just to add, we've left our list in a ranked order, which reflects the scores that they received from their collective evaluation. So that allows, depending on the final number of workshops that there is for the IGF as a whole in this virtual setting, and the way that we end up deciding to balance it between the tracks, then you have a kind of numerical order for which to take forward from our track anyway.
We actually have a proposal about numbers that the Secretariat and I prepared, but we'll come back to that. Let's hear all the groups, and then before you do your next round of breakouts, we can come to a decision on how to approach numbers. Jutta, next question, over to you.
Yes, thank you for giving me the floor. I wanted to give an answer, not a question, but reflect on what you said about sub-themes and asked about sub-themes. And I just wanted to add that you can see from these sub-themes we have in the group of trust, it mirrors more or less that last year this track was called Safety, Stability, Security and Resilience. So I do think it's a very broad variety of different issues that have to be dealt with under the track of trust, and that is mirrored by these diverse sub-themes that we have among these workshop proposals. And it's also mirrored somehow by that high number of 98 workshops that have been sent into the track of trust. So, and we ended up with these sub-themes more or less. We started in February with them, and it was very much mirrored by the workshop proposals that were sent in for that track. Just as an explanation. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Jutta. My reaction to the sub-themes is that I suppose, I mean, maybe it will make sense. I'd like to see them in a narrative. You know, just for example, you have under infrastructure, you have attributing attacks. But many people would see that as a cybersecurity topic. So I think you don't have to do that now, but I think it you know, for the participant in the IGF, understanding how you see these sub-themes will become important.
If I can respond to that, Henriette, we did that work when we developed the narrative for the trust team at the beginning of the year. Although that information was not all published on the website, the trust team did policy questions for each one of those sub-themes. And the narrative that was put together was kind of based on all of the different bits and pieces. So it would be quite, not easy, let's say, but it would be very natural to come up with a solution for what you are proposing, because that's in the spirit of how the narrative was structured in January.
Yes, and we have much more time to look at this as well. But thanks very much. And I see Susan, okay, you'll be the last person to speak on this, and then we'll move on. In the meantime, next there'll be inclusion. So inclusion, you can get ready to report. Susan, you have the floor.
Apologies, I have to double unmute on the phone. Thank you, Annette. Just very briefly, one idea for a narrative that Paul and I used last year in the inclusion track, which I thought was quite useful and informative, was to kind of track the OSI model. So in inclusion, we started out with the layer one, and we're talking about the importance of infrastructure and developing infrastructure, and then that kind of translated up through the stack, and so we're able to associate different topics with the different layers, which I thought was kind of a neat way to, for those attendees at the IGF who aren't per se familiar with the more infrastructural aspects of the internet and the layers. I thought that was interesting, and certain folks found it interesting as well to learn about it and to think about internet topics in that way. So just
thanks for that, Susan. Please, everyone, Anya just typed this in the chat. If you are not speaking, please mute your mic. Thanks very much to the trust group for your report. If there are no more questions, and I don't see any, can we please move on to inclusion to give us their report?
Yes, hi, Paul Rowney here. I'll report on inclusion. I don't know if we can pull up our report, but our understanding on the numbers was slightly different. For inclusion, we had 70 proposals, and we thought we had 18 of the slots, and that's what we've worked our proposal based on. Obviously, we would like to have more. if the ratios are different and we can get more, obviously we would like to have more for the inclusion group. On the narrative, we did make a minor tweak, and this really was just to bring in the issue of COVID-19 that wasn't part of the initial narrative, and it's like a footnote or a final sentence. Quite a lot of the workshops, whilst not directly talking about COVID, they raise issues that are aligned with COVID, that are aligned with inclusion, etc. So for us, we felt it quite important to just bring that into the narrative. When we look at the sub-themes, we built from the initial sub-themes that we had identified when we went for the call for workshops, and we amended those slightly based on the workshop topics that the workshop proposers identified their workshops against. And that's led us to 6 sub-themes, which you can see there, which is the local content, language diversity, availability, affordability, access of infrastructure, design and policy for social inclusion and environmental sustainability, digital literacy and capacity building, digital economy and emerging technologies, and governance and policy. The main things that have really emerged is the environmental sustainability, which came out of our face-to-face really, and the emerging technologies. So those are sort of new tweaks away from the sub-themes of last year. We have listed the topics that the workshops identified themselves against, and we've tried to align those with the different sub-themes. That brought us basically, if we can go to the next page, a listing of the number of those 70 workshops that were aligned to each sub-theme. And this we found quite interesting. So Louise, can you go to the next page? If we look at some of the traditional topics, we've sort of moved away from some of the traditional topics, and the main focus of the workshop proposals that were submitted are more around the policy design and policy for social inclusion, environmental sustainability, the digital economy and emerging technologies. That accounted for 50% of the workshops that were submitted. So we're moving away from the traditional access and affordability issues. When we looked at the workshops that we categorized into the green basket, you'll see we actually put a threshold of the green at the top 14 workshops. There's others in the green, but based on the 18, we decided that at least 80% of those should be represented based on the top scorers. Out of the top scorers, the top 14, 2 of those were aligned to local content and language diversity, none on availability, affordability and access, 4 for design, policy and social inclusion, 3 for digital literacy, and 3 for digital economy and 2 for governance and policy. So this led us to the balancing, and out of the balancing, we then lifted up some workshops, but based on the interest of the stakeholders, we didn't give the same number of workshops per sub-theme. We basically balanced it based on the number or the interest across all of the workshops. So that led us basically to assigning 2 of the 18 workshops to local content, 3 to availability, affordability, 4 to design and policy, 3 to digital literacy, capacity building, 4 to digital economy, and 2 to governance. So this really was to balance the workshop based on the presenter's interest. So when we balanced it up, you'll see that if we scroll down to the next page, you'll see that we brought in 4 workshops from the yellow basket. And that's given us our top 18. When it comes to mergers, we did evaluate the workshops. We didn't identify any mergers that would improve the quality or the diversity of those workshops. When we move into workshop diversity, it mirrors a little bit the overall diversity. You'll see that civil society accounts for 50%. We did see if there was a possibility to balance that, in particular trying to raise government and private sector. But when we looked at that, changing workshops didn't really change the balance much away from where it is there. And it is in line with the overall diversity on stakeholder. Regional, I think we got good balance on the regional. It's a little low on the LAC. We would have liked to have improved LAC participation a little bit. And on gender, it was 50-50. So on the last, we have sorry, my kids are in the back. We have broken it down into a flow of how we see the program flows. So I'm going to end here and open the floor to other working group members to add anything that I might have missed.
Thanks for that, Paul. Arsene is writing in the chat that the kids seem really happy. I admire your perseverance. Anyone else want to add? I have some questions, but let's give the opportunity first to others in this group to contribute.
Yes, Madam Chair, may I jump in?
Yes, Roberto, go ahead. Just introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. I am Roberto Zambrana. I am from Bolivia, acting in my own capacity, and I'm a MAC member, and part also of this group with Paul and Mary and some other colleagues. And Paul mentioned it, everything pretty much clear. Actually, I wanted to clarify the numbers that we had, just as general information. We indeed had 26 slots assigned for trust. We had 18 slots assigned for inclusion, 12 for data, and 5 for environment. And in our case, we tried to get inside that number. Actually, I think we have 18. We need to revise that. But we consider that many more of those proposals are really good and should be considered. But that something that we were waiting, as we all know, is the top number that we could use in order to allocate the different slots. I think that's something that we're going to discuss later, because that will give us the final numbers, maybe keeping the proportions if every group agrees in that we could keep that original numbers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Roberto. Jutta, I see your hand. Do you want to ask a question, or is that an old hand?
Sorry, that's an old hand. I used to queue.
Thanks, Jutta. So my question, if I understand correctly, is that your sub-theme, so I have 2 questions at this point. The sub-theme for sub-theme 3, design and policy for social inclusion and environmental sustainability. I just want to understand how that relates to our environment track. And then my other question was, how did you deal with, for example, gender or race or issues of inclusion about, that relate to specific groups of people and users. Which sub-theme, or do you have workshops that deal with gender issues, and which sub-theme would you have clustered those under?
First of all, sorry, Madam Chair, I think I didn't express very well myself. What I was talking, the numbers I mentioned are the numbers that we included in the general guidance. And I just wanted to clarify which were the numbers allocated for each thematic track. That was the numbers I was saying before. Those were not the numbers in our group in order to select the sub-themes.
That's fine. I'm not talking about numbers. We'll come back and talk about numbers later on. I'm just curious about your sub-themes and how you see the sub-theme 3, if I understand correctly, sub-theme 3 of inclusion, which has environmental sustainability in it. How does that relate to our track for environment? And then I'm just curious about how you dealt with gender.
Yeah, I can respond to that. If Luis can just scroll up a little bit and look at the topics, we've actually highlighted the topic the same color as the sub-theme. And we felt that gender falls under the design and policy for social inclusion. With regards to environmental sustainability, this was one of our sub-themes that we actually put in at the beginning, but we could probably remove it because there wasn't any workshop submitted under inclusion actually that addressed, well, there's one on environmental impact. So yeah, but it was an inclusion workshop that was looking into the environment, but it wouldn't fit into the environmental track. And that's why we sort of bundled it with the design and policy for social inclusion, because it didn't really fit anywhere else.
And
So,
is that
so Luis,
workshop in your green basket?
Which workshop?
The one related to environment, I think it's not.
Yes.
It's not in the green basket.
Okay, it's not in your green basket. I'm just asking because we have, as you'll see when we have the report from environment, they had relatively few workshops. So I think if there's any workshop that might be long, I know you've discussed this already, but we can still, if necessary, consider shifting a workshop to another track. Any questions?
Sorry, Madam Chair, you had a second question about I think we didn't respond to that.
No, I think Paul did. He did respond.
Okay.
His response was that gender, you clustered under design and policy for social inclusion.
Exactly.
So I think that's good. Just remember again that from a user's perspective, a conference attendee, you'd want to make that explicit. You don't want people to look at the IGF program and feel that gender is not considered a serious topic. So that's just, but that the narrative track can play that role. Any questions for this group? Okay, I see no questions for clarification. Thanks very much, Roberto and Paul and everyone else. Next, we have environment. Environment, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Yes, we are.
Please go ahead. Just introduce yourself for the record again.
Yes, so while Luis is pulling up our document, this is Timur Schutte, business community member in my third year. And I am one of the coordinators for the environment track, together with my colleagues June and Karim, who I want to thank for all their help. And I also want to thank the group for their contributions. While Luis is pulling up the document, I just wanted to give a really quick overview on our methodology. There it is. So we followed roughly the same method that the other groups who presented so far followed. And I also want to thank all the other coordinators from the different tracks for the coordination and the discussion that we had, and for Roberto and the team on producing the guidelines. I think that was really, really helpful for all of us to sort of go down the same path and have a more cohesive approach to the work that we've been doing. So what we've done here in the environment track, we had a total of 19 proposals. So when we compare it with 90 from other tracks, there is a difference. But that also allowed us to really go deep and discuss each proposal very, very carefully. Firstly, the three coordinators, we looked through the proposals and the MAGS rankings and produced some very rough guidelines for the group. We proposed that we put in the green basket proposals with a score of 4 and above. That resulted in about 20% of the workshops proposed. And we also noted that we should put into the red basket the proposals that scored below 3.5, and that was about 25% of the workshops that we put into that red basket. If we go down one more page, Luis, please. We also proposed to look in the yellow basket to try and fill up certain gaps that might have been identified in the green basket. And the main areas that we've seen there was gender diversity and regional diversity. So as a second stage, the group really accepted these proposals from the coordinators. And then we had a very nice hour in which we really managed to go through the proposals in the yellow basket with the people who managed to dial in. So thanks Liana and Titi and Lucien and everybody else in the group for your contributions into that discussion. And what resulted there is really, just to give the highlights, an agreement that we should follow the general ranking of the workshops as the MAG graded it. So we didn't want to change the order, but what we did is we marked some of the sessions in that yellow basket, and those are 10 sessions altogether, that did a bit less well than the others, or if they have any major significant gaps in diversity, or if they lacked in any other way. And those are the ones that we marked not yellow and not red, but orange. So if you scroll down to the couple of next pages, Luis, colleagues will be able to see that we have a couple of orange marked workshop as well. That's basically our recommendation would be to keep the green ones as they are in the top four scored workshops, and then the next 10 would be our yellow basket, and depending on how much space we have, we recommend having those 10 included. There is also a suggestion for merger, and there's also, as I said, the suggestion with marked orange that we can revisit if we need to reduce space. We also agree in the group that those that we put in the red basket can be advised to try again next year with a more fleshed out proposal. So here in the slide that Luis is sharing now is our thinking around the sub-themes and how the session would flow. There were around 10 or 11 sub-themes marked by the community for the workshops that they proposed. We narrowed those down into 4 categories. First would be digital infrastructure and smart cities. That would focus more on the angles of connectivity, sustainable connectivity, energy, sustainable data centers, issues like that. The second group is called Digital Technology Applications for Sustainability, and this is more on the application of smart technology to make anything more green, more environmental friendly, and more sustainable. And this is the applications of emerging tech, data governance considerations, or just innovative technology to smart and green approaches. The third workshop goes slightly more into the negatives or the externalities of digital technologies. I have to say that all workshops that were proposed, or most of the workshops, really looked at the issue from both pro and cons, so they were pretty balanced in that, but there are a few that focus more on the positives of tech and some of that focus more on the negatives of tech. And this third basket is approaching that angle. Also looking at methods of counterbalancing some of those negative approaches, and promoting responsible consumption and a circular economy for ICT and ICT applications. And then the fourth basket is a very interesting basket as well, that goes into not necessarily the applications of technology, but content online as it relates to climate change and environmental issues, and that is climate change misinformation, or sharing knowledge, or building partnerships online to learn from one another about environmental change. So those are our four themes, and you can see there we slotted not only the workshops that are in our green or yellow baskets, but we put all of them just for colleagues to see what we eliminate, how, and also that is color coded. So as we would eliminate workshops, how that track would look like and how the sub-themes would look like. In terms of diversity, we proposed a couple of scenarios. So those are the last 4 slides here. Basically looking at, if we only look at the green group, so the first 4 workshops, this is how diversity looks like. You can see there that gender is pretty unbalanced. It's only 1/3 female versus 2/3 male. Civil society proposals or speakers were a bit overrepresented, and so that the WEOG group was a bit more represented than the others. But as we go down, for example, if you look only at the green and the bright yellow proposals in the next slide, you see that already pretty much balances out in terms of gender and the regional diversity, while WEOG is still very much leading, starts to break up as well. And the stakeholder group is getting more balanced. And then if you look at the next one, with that one merger that we suggested, I think this is already a very, very well balanced in terms of the diversity considerations, and also on all of the sub themes that that the community has suggested are already included. And then the last slide would be basically our ideal scenario, if possible, that would include all of the workshops that the group deemed that did well, that counterbalances on the other to the other side a little bit the gender diversity, but we're hoping that that's not a bad thing, especially considering the whole of the speakers. And it also balances out very well the regional and the stakeholder diversity. One thing that we want to mention in general about the workshops in environment track, considering all 19 proposals, there was only one speaker that was listed as a government speaker. So we would definitely want to make a recommendation to any one workshop proposal in this track to try and consider promoting their workshop to the government sector, so that they can have that have those participants also well represented. So that is a not so quick overview of what we did. I'm here to respond to any of your questions if you have them.
Thanks very much, Tamea. Does anyone have anything to add or any questions for Tamea? Sylvia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Riet. Now that Timea mentioned the issue with the speaker on the government, the low participation of government, let's say, one of the things that we detected during the analysis for the trust proposals is that a lot of speakers didn't really select it properly, their stakeholder group in the regional groupings as well. So I think that to be able to have proper statistics about the final program, we really need to get on the case of those organizers and speakers to actually have accurate information. On the list of the 49 proposals that I assessed, I think around half of those had speakers from technical community listed as civil society, because a lot of people from universities are registered as non-for-profit organizations in their countries. So they listed that as a civil society organization when actually academia is part of technical community. And there were quite a few cases in which New Zealand, Australia, and some other Asian countries that are part of the WEOG region were also listed as APAC instead of WEOG. One other irregularity that I found with those profiles was quite strange, that I got a couple of US government representatives that are listed as US Department of State, and they picked an intergovernmental organization. So I think there are some, and that was kind of consistent across. So my gut tells me that the civil society pie that we are seeing is actually not that big. So maybe there is something there that the Secretariat could do to help us run some sort of campaign to get people to update properly their community profiles, and or some other way of getting that information. So if they mark the country where they are, then the country is added to the regional group or something like that. So it is actually more accurate. I don't think we have. I added all of those comments into my comments to the proposals that I checked. So those organizers will receive those comments. But it will be really good to see why that happened. And I will, I can tell you exactly which proposals are they, but I'm worried that is something that might be common in other tracks, and just people may not have the time to actually click on the name of each one of the speakers to double check.
This is good. It means that we would want to verify at some point, and certainly for next year, to try and find a way of getting better data. Thanks very much to Maya and everyone. What strikes me here is that, we took a very un-UN type definition of environment. And I wonder that if we use the classical definition of sustainability and sustainable development, which includes environmental impact and human development. In other words, if we used a more holistic way of defining this theme, I wonder if we would have had bigger numbers. It's really interesting. And for those of you who heard the head of UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Program, speaking at the roadmap launch, she was really adamant, and she challenged Fabrizio to say that, in fact, environment should not be an add-on to the roadmap, that environmental sustainability is at the core of human existence and survival. So I think, and when I look at the sub-themes, which I think are really great, I've looked at, they make a lot of sense. I think in your narrative, what would be important would be to show the human dimension of those sub-themes, to show how for example, which one is, so the circular economy, actually, how that impacts on people, how smart cities have ways of including and excluding people. So I think in your narrative, take a broad approach when you describe these sub-themes, but they make good sense to me, and I think you've done a great job. Liana, you wanted to ask something. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Anne-Red, for giving the floor to me, Liana Galston speaking. Since we're talking about some concerns, I wanted to raise another one that I found in our basket and the workshop that we had. One of the workshop proposers said that we have also invited a member of Open Culture Foundation in Taiwan to speak in the session. However, the IGF does not allow participation from citizens of Taiwan. So I wanted to make sure that this issue is raised up and to the Secretariat, and we would reach out to this proposal to say that the IGF is inclusive, has the inclusive nature, so everyone is welcome there. It's not like anyone is not allowing any other speaker from any particular country or whatever is there. So maybe it's a misunderstanding, but I wanted to make sure that we reach out this proposer and say that it's not the case with the IGF. We welcome everyone. I will send a number to Secretariat so that they would have this contact.
Thanks, Liana. And I wonder if perhaps with a remote IGF, there might be more opportunity here, but I won't raise that now. I think Secretariat just let's note this. It is an important point to consider. Okay, I think you've really done very well prepared work. So mergers at this point, I just want to keep track. How many proposals for mergers do we have at the moment? We had none from Trust, am I right?
Actually, we had one from Trust.
One from Trust.
It's not a required merger because one of them wasn't in the green basket.
Yeah, that's right.
The proposed merger. Yeah.
Inclusion, did you have a merger proposal?
No, we don't, Madam Chair.
Didn't. And go ahead, Roberto.
Yeah, I just had of the recent presentation, I just want to have a quick recommendation or suggestion, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
It's related to the numbers they apply it. When they use the percentage that was calculated based on the overall number of proposals, they indeed get the number 4. But when we developed the guidelines, you will see that in the annex, we actually increased that number in order to provide a little bit of more balance. So that's why in the general guidelines, the number is 5 for the slots that the environment group could allocate. So my suggestion is if they consider it possible, perhaps to increase one of those proposals to the green basket.
Good. We'll come back and we'll come back to the discussion of numbers. So thanks very much to inclusion. Data, we're running a little bit late, not badly. So Data, you have the floor now.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm trying to.
I can hear you, Maria.
I'm going. Yeah. I'm looking for the presentation because I asked Luis to control my presentation. It will make it easier for me. So can you see it now?
Yes, we can
perfect.
see you and we can see your presentation.
Perfect. So in the case of the data track, we try to follow as much as possible the procedure that was well delineated by the process working group. Always having in mind, as Silvia mentioned it before in the chat, that the main goal of the selection of workshop or the proposition that we'll be presenting is to taking care of the highest quality of the workshop proposal, as the other group also did, and try to reflect as much as possible the diversity from the community that will be proposing or participating as speakers in the proposal, but also the diversity of the topics that were identified at the beginning of the year as the relevant ones for being part of this track, according to the information that we gather in the calls for information that we put outside for understanding what the community wants to see as part of the program this year. So taking into consideration the guidelines that the working group in process did, we consider as an initial number of assessment the number of 12 workshops for the data track. Bearing in mind that this number could be modified later according the total number of workshops that we decide for this year. So we started with an initial signalizing of belonging of in the green basket of the 12 highest scored workshop in our track. So from there, we take it to review what kind of gaps were existing in terms of topics, the different sub-teams initially identified, and also looking into how those green basket proposal, initial green basket proposal, maybe had elements that were duplicated or could be considered that will be good fit for mergers, or there was some elements missing in terms of the topic, the subtopics that we were identifying, or sub-teams that we were identifying as relevant for the track. So according to that analysis that we did, we start to make some of correction in this allocation of the initial 12 highest scored proposal. And we, different from the other groups, we approach with a little bit more flexibility to the rule of not proposing mergers for the 10% highest score, because the different elements that I just mentioned, how the different rules provided for the procedure play, make for us relevant to give preference to the idea of having high quality session and also representative of the whole topics that were part of the track and the different regions and interests from different communities. So because of that, we propose some mergers. None of these proposals are mandatory, of course, are suggestion, initial suggestion. And we, for example, propose to merge the first, the highest scored workshop proposal in our green basket with the highest scored proposal in the yellow basket, because the two represent a topic that it was the same, very close. And in that particular case, what's pointed out by the member of the group, that one of these proposal features speakers and representatives of 2 regions of the world, and the other one, the other 2 regions. So the idea of combining them, it will precisely allows us to achieve a diversity in the discussion that it was not present in each one of those sessions, although the 2 sessions were very high scored. One was the highest scored of the whole track, and the other one was pretty good. It was the first one in the yellow basket. Then we move to the proposal that we have in the number 4 of the track in the green basket, that we thought collectively that it was a very good proposal for moving to a main session, because the relevance of the topic, particularly in the current circumstances of the impact of the pandemic in the use of digital technologies. So we thought that it would be a good candidate for moving to a main session, and this is the one that is in orange in the screen. We continue keeping all the others that were in the first, in the top of the 12 session for the track. And in the case of the number 7 that you can see here, we also propose a merger with the session in the number 9, which also belonged to the green basket, because again, this was precisely the same topic, that it was addressing the issue of data privacy in the context of COVID-19. There was a good complementarity again between the speaker coming from different groups and representative. The proposition of the merger will strengthen the diversity of this conversation, that is a very relevant one in the current circumstances. And finally, the last merger that we propose, so we are proposing 3 eventual mergers. It's the one that linked the session number 10 in the list of the highest scored proposal to the one that it was in the, I'm sorry, it was not merged here. but it's later. It's with the, I'm sorry, I lost my track with this, but this was a merger with the one that is here in the, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm looking for the information down. Yeah, so the one that I was presenting, it was the one regarding to the availability of data for monitoring the SDGs that is explained here. I lost track in the table for finding it, but here it's explained. And there was two proposals that were covering the issue of monitoring the SDG, but the difference between the two is that one was proposing to monitor in a more broader way, gathering data regarding the different SDGs, and the other one was more devoted to particularly the SDGs and the information about information communication technology relevant for the fulfillment of the SDGs. So at the beginning, there was not agreement in the group. There were some members of the group that were not sure about merging these two topics, but finally, in a last round of consultation, we decided to put forward the recommendation for merger, particularly having into consideration to free some space for filling some gaps regarding the thematic areas that were not covered by the high score proposal at that point. So with that, there was with this proposal mergers and the freed space by the main session proposal that we did, there was some space freed for the inclusion of some of the proposal in the yellow basket. And there, the main criteria for moving some of the proposal in the yellow basket to the green basket, it was to try to fill the gaps in the thematic areas that were identified as relevant. And we proposed to move the proposals from the yellow basket, one regarding the future of work from home, internet, and governance post-COVID, because we feel, again, that this was a relevant thematic to cover, particularly in this context. The one regarding data flows, trade, and international cooperation, there were a relevant number of proposals in this topic in the overall set of proposal, but this was the highest scored from all of them. So we picked that one for representing that sub-team that we still feel that is very relevant to discuss in the track. Then we selected also from the yellow basket one proposal regarding the children's right and participation in data governance, in order to also cover some diversity in the perspective for the issue that it was not well represented in the original 12 highest scored proposal, and the same for open data for women and persons with disabilities, that we thought that also was relevant to consider the issue of vulnerable groups in the track with a workshop proposal that particularly addressed these issues like this one. And also in this case, it was very relevant that this was a proposal that was put forward by African representatives, and they were the ones that was less well represented in the overall of the initial green basket. So we thought that a way to compensate that deficit was precisely to pick one of the yellow basket proposal that addressed that issue, with the specific recommendation to them to add to this conversation other geographical representation and make it more global and not only regional for Africa. So I think that with that, I will move to the identification of how we cover the sub-team proposal with this correction from the moving some of the yellow basket to the green basket. We cover the thematic lines that we defined originally for the track in the following way. So we have for governance dimension of for data-driven technologies, three proposals, sorry. Then digital identity, we have 2. Data-driven emerging technology, we have 3. For data-driven business model 2, for data access, quality, interoperability, competition, and innovation 2, and for the final one on the impact of digital sovereignty and internet fragmentation on trust, we have 1. That way, we felt that we achieve a pretty balanced and diverse selection of the proposal that were all highest scored, because even the ones ones that didn't make it originally in the green basket and belonged to the yellow basket, they were very close in scoring to the green ones. So in general, we are very comfortable that this proposal represents a very balanced approach to the thematic areas and the different geographic and sectors and other diversities representation. We are aware of the issue of the merger, that we are the group that we are proposing more mergers than the others, and we are aware that we were against the rule of the 10% highest score proposal that was proposed by the working group on process, but we believe that that would need to be pondered against the other issues of quality, diversity, and sub-team covering that are also very relevant. And a final word, we didn't consider the lowest 30% proposals in scoring, which are the ones that belong to the red basket, although there were very good proposals there, and the cutting scoring between the yellow and the red one, it was very close. There was pointed out, I received some questions regarding some specific proposals that were considered of high quality and they didn't make it to the final round for the yellow basket, and it's because the scoring was just too close. So we followed in that case the rule of not including them in the yellow basket because they were the 30% lowest scoring, but none of them fulfilled the rule of less than 2 points of scoring. All of them were about that point. So I will leave it there and I will take any question. And also I forget to mention at the beginning that I really appreciate all the work that all the members of the group did reviewing the propositions that we put forward with Chennai, chair, my co-facilitator in the track, and all the time that they devoted to this very complex analysis of all the rules that we need to apply, but that at the end was very useful for arriving to this result. So thank you very much to the working group in process also for providing those guidelines and everyone that provide further recommendation in the way in which we could move forward with this process. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Maria Paz. Can you just go back to your sub-themes, just so we see those on screen? Any questions or additions to the data tracks report? And I see you are all busily chatting in the chat. Please, I find it very hard to follow the chat and listen to the speaker at the same time. So I really urge people to take the floor. Jutta, did you want to add?
I would like to follow up something that was addressed in the chat, and I'm a bit wondering how those proposals that were suggested for merger in the data track ended up ranking on the first place in the data track when they failed to address diversity. So I understood the reason to merge them was not enough diversity, and I was wondering how it could come that they ended up ranking on first and third place if they fail diversity. That's my question to Maria Paz.
Sure. You know that the approach that we have for diversity this year, we say that there was a number of criteria for addressing diversity. One of them was geographic diversity. So at the end, they addressed other type of diversity in the proposal that result in the high scoring of the proposal. But then the geographic balance was not very well achieved, and there were recommendations of improving that. But still, the quality, the overall quality of the proposal was very good. So I cannot provide like further explanation about that because that was the result of the collective assessment of the group. But is that what I can say about it? And also because in many of these workshops, I don't recall exactly if this was the case or not. When there was some issues, one of the alternatives of the scoring was that they were like putting for a plan for improving the diversity issue that they have. So in some of these, there was some announcement that they will be revisiting the issues about diversity and complementing that. So overall, I think that especially because of the current circumstances that we are living, there will be, I will expect that it will be much more openness from the workshop organizer to review and take some of the suggestions that we as the MAC members could put together regarding how to strengthen the diversity in the participation. I don't think that may be different to what happened in other kind of situation, and particularly in-person events. It will be so dramatic now to require them to make some revision and try to see how they could fit with other workshop proposals that were not accepted, in how to take those speakers and improve the participation of the accepted workshop. I think that there is a role that we as a MEC could play on that. But okay, of course, this is a personal view. This don't even represent the data track view. It's my personal vision on that. Thank you.
And Sylvia, you have the floor. I cannot see the speakers queue right now. So Louise, if you can put that on screen, please. Sylvia.
Thank you, Henriette. Silvia Cadena, Technical Community, for the record. Well, besides the discussion that is going on the chat about to merge or not to merge from the top 10, which I already expressed my opinion on that, I just wanted to remind us all that for this year, we actually agreed to make a change on how the diversity was scored, and that not all aspects of diversity were to be addressed by all the session organizers. So what we said, and Luis can correct me around the language, but it was up to 3, right? So we listed a lot of options, geographic diversity, gender, stakeholder group, difference of perspective, and a bunch of other diversity, people with disabilities, and etc. But they didn't have to fill all of them. If they were fulfilling 3, then they could get a 4 or a 5 on their score if they were expressed correctly. So I think I think I understand the assessment of the data group and the effort of trying to merge to accommodate to that number of 18 workshops, but I think it would be best not to merge proposals on the top 10, and to be also mindful that we were the ones that said that was the definition for diversity for this year, and that we are not expecting workshop organizers to address everything under the sun, because that is impossible, right? We did agree on that. So if we are going to modify that definition to be able to say which part of diversity is more important, or which one is mandatory and the other ones are additional, then that was not on the call for proposals. And I think would be very hard to assess proposals based on our very different views about what is more important than others. And we should only refer to what we agreed on the call for proposals. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sylvia. Chennai, you asked for the floor as well.
Hi, Henriette. Sorry, I'm just turning on my camera. Hi, everyone. Chennai Chair, MAG representative, civil society, calling in from a very cold Johannesburg. So I do understand so I just want to second Maria Paz's position, because this is where it has also come out from an argument when we're looking at the data track. I do understand the thought process that went in terms of diversity, and I understand that it's always a point of whether sessions get merged or we don't, and I've also been contributing to the chat. So what I actually wanted to say is, I think fair enough that the process has been decided and then this is what diversity looks like. But I am quite concerned that the data track, and I don't know if this was picked up in the other sessions, that the data track ended up looking very Western Europe orientated. So that was, I guess, one of the reasons why we were very much looking at merging these sessions and creating space. Because I think now also, because at that time we were thinking about it, that it's going to be in the physical space in Poland. And at the end of the day, we're really trying to make sure that can we have a session that just does not, a track that's not just really representative of one complete region. So I think going forward, and I guess this is also pertaining to the announcement that you will tell us, Henriette, I guess it's something that when we go into the breakout sessions, we would know how many sessions are actually going to go through going forward. And secondly, I think it is something that's meant to be taken into account that, yes, we have said diversity, if you can't address everything underneath the sun, but we cannot, I strongly believe we cannot have a data track that is representative of one region alone. And if then that means that perhaps more analysis should be done in terms of like where some of these sessions are coming from and where they end up, because the two sessions that we did propose as well that were in the yellow basket but were not as strong did respond to gender and I think
children and future of work and children.
Yeah, and children as well. Because I think for us, it was really important to have a track that's more reflective of different things going on in society and would also be able to address that diversity issue. So I look forward to the breakout room and the comments that are going to come from the chair in terms of how many sessions are going to be put forward. But I do think that as we're thinking about these rules and for the future work, that this is noted that as a point of analysis, that if we're going to have tracks that are representative of one region in our current society, I think maybe then, we do need to continuously work on this understanding of diversity. And I do understand the MAG's job is not to cover everything underneath the sun. So that is my intervention, and I look forward to the breakout rooms.
Madam Chair, I know that we are over the time, but I just want to respond very shortly to some of the comments on the chat. I truly believe as a lawyer by training that the rules need to be pondered. So there was a rule regarding not recommending mergers of the 10 highest percent scoring. I am aware of that. I mentioned it in my intervention. All the group was aware of that. Chennai and I, we request everyone to read the rules that was provided by the working group on process. But as a lawyer that I mentioned, I know that the rules need to be pondered to be balanced and achieve the intended result. As Chennai has brilliantly pointed out just now, there was a particular consideration in this track that I believe that for some reason happened here and not in the other groups. I don't know why is that we failed in some way in the scoring process, or it was something that was just related to the type of proposal that were received. By the realities that we confront a stack of a workshop proposal that had this characteristic, and the other issue very relevant is that we have very high scored proposal that repeated the very same topic. So we couldn't have 4 proposal regarding the privacy consideration of the COVID-19. There were at least 4 in the highest scored proposal that had that topic covered. And I think that the understanding of the mergers also, it could be maybe a different one in this case. We could consider that the one that is accepted is the highest scored of the 2 that we are proposing merger, and just to mention to the other organizers of the other one that we are proposing to merger with, mentioning that their proposal were not accepted, but that they could be invited as a speaker in another session covering the same topic that it has been accepted. So I don't know if the right word for addressing the issue is mergers. Maybe it's not mergers, but more like picking the highest scored and leave it that established at the accepted session, and invite from the other proposal additional speakers to fulfill the gaps that are in the accepted proposal. That could be another option that I think that could be possible, and maybe the MAC will feel more comfortable with that, because it will not be properly a merger, but a different approach. I will leave it there. Thanks.
Sorry, I'm just getting pen and paper here to make notes. Thanks for that, and thanks for the responses. We have Tamaya and Jennifer, and then we'll move on to a general discussion. So Tamaya, you are next.
Many thanks, Henriette, and I'll try to be brief. And thank you to Maria Paz and to Chennai for all the explanations and the hard work. I think you definitely have your best, everybody's best interest in mind, and you're trying to find the best solutions for this. So I do understand how hard it is, especially when you have so many good proposals to choose from. So I really, I don't want to be in your shoes right now, for sure. But what I would like to perhaps offer as a compromise solution for the group to consider, and I am part also of the data track and the environment track, so I'll try to split myself into two and try and work with you guys as well this afternoon. But what Chennai said, I think it's very important that we need to make sure that we don't let any one group to overtake the others, and I completely understand that. And I also understand what you are saying, what you're trying to do is consider the rules flexible and trying to make sure that the overarching purpose is observed and the rules don't stay in the way of that. And I can also understand why you're saying that. But I think that this doesn't really have to exclude one and the other. The fact that we agreed to have a rule that we have the top 10%, so not even the top 10 workshops, the top 10%, that doesn't have to be, that means 5 workshops for the data track, not to be considered for mergers. That leaves, I think, enough space to try and correct any sort of gaps that those sessions bring from the rest of the workshops. And this is what all the other tracks are trying to do. And I do understand that while 3 tracks out of the 4 are following the same process, perhaps it stands out a little bit too much that this track is taking another approach. And I understand that some people are confused about that. So maybe you want to try and look back, what are the actual gaps that are there and how we can make sure that we overcome those gaps when we are looking at the track, and while also we are observing the process. And as you said, the rules are there to be reconsidered and changed and make them work for us and for our purposes. But there's also a time and place to do that. And I am not sure that we should be changing rules in the middle of the process. Or maybe we can think about it for next year. We didn't say we shouldn't have mergers at all. We just said to find a compromise solutions, don't have mergers in the very, very top of the track. And I think that is still a rule that can be observed, and through that we can still achieve the goals that Chennai so eloquently stated. Thank you both.
Thanks, Tamaya. Jennifer.
Only to respond to
Jennifer first.
Oh, sorry.
Jennifer, are you ready?
Yes, I am ready. Thank you, Henriette. I have a problem with starting my camera. I apologize for that. It seems I'm not able to this time for some reason, but I can go ahead. I just wanted to put on record what I was also putting in chat, since thank you, Henriette, for the reminder. My name is Jennifer Chung. I'm a 3rd-year MAG member, and I'm part of the private sector. I think there's 2 main things that we need to keep in consideration here. And I think many colleagues have mentioned it on chat, but maybe not on voice, that we created the set of guidelines and rules in order for us to make sure we take any kind of conflicts of interest, any personal bias out of the equation when we do our evaluations. And as MAG members, when we do our evaluations, it's actually very important that we uphold this process, because if we are undermining our own scoring, that makes the entire mechanism suffers from it. It is actually not a good look for us. That being said, I think the second thing is, even though in past years, as MAG member and also as an observer, I've noted that every time mergers are discussed and considered, it is an extremely difficult task. I think one of the past MAG members have mentioned that, there was a hope that mergers weren't being seen as being a penalty. And this is not what I'm trying to get at here either. But I am saying that when we are looking at very highly scored proposals, we do have a set of tools as MAG members that we can use to address any perceived lack on these proposals without jumping straight to the most difficult one to achieve, which would be the mergers. I think that's also another reason why the other tracks are very cautious about suggesting mergers, because also given experience, it is quite difficult to achieve that. You know, to merge a proposal that has scored very highly and is very considered with a proposal that is completely different is always very difficult. So I think I wanted to highlight these 2 points. Thank you.
Thanks for that. We are running out of time and we have to discuss numbers, but Maria Paz, you wanted to respond, and I think you said there was only one workshop, but
Yeah.
please go ahead and respond.
Yeah, only to respond the question made by Timea, we did the analysis about what of the proposal would be affected by the 10% rule, as you mentioned. That means that from the top 5 workshop, there shouldn't be any merger proposal. So that leaves a very easy solution. The easy solution is like just leave it the highest workshop in the green basket, the number 1, as it is, not proposing the merger with the first one in the yellow basket, and just to work with them to improve the diversity, the geographic diversity. And it's very easy, and it's the only proposal that will be affected by that rule. If all the group is very concerned with following the procedures, that's the very easy fix. Because the other one that it's proposed to do something special in the group of the top 5 is the one that we are proposing as a main session, not as a merger. And if that proposition is not accepted, also will stay there and will not be affected in any form. So it's not dramatic change in our evaluation if the group believe that that rule should be followed in this case. It's an easy fix. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria Paz. My personal view, in fact, I mean, I don't want to go against the process because I know that we agreed on the workshop evaluation working group's suggestion. Personally, I actually, and from my own experience, I think if handled with sensitivity, even high scoring workshops can benefit from a voluntary merger, you know, not a compelled merger. So but I think I take the point, and I think this is a decision that was discussed earlier and there was agreement on how to handle mergers. I also just want to remind everyone that if I remember correctly, the survey that was done last year by the workshop process working group, the response from 2019 session organizers was actually quite positive. People weren't negative about being asked to merge. So I think we shouldn't feel so incredibly reluctant to ask people to merge. I just think we need to do it with sensitivity and care, and it has to be voluntary. We can't compel. I think particularly you know, if it is a high scoring workshop, even if it's not a very high scoring workshop, but if it's a workshop that did a good proposal, we do need to be careful about that. But Maria Paz, I think that my sense is there's a strong feeling from the MAG that they would like all the tracks to stick to the agreed procedure. But I think, you know, you've made a strong argument, and when you go back into your breakout group, I think take on board what you've heard from the MAG, but if you still feel strongly that you can make a very good case for asking for an exception to that, I think you should do that. I just want to mention something else. We didn't talk a lot about sub-themes. I wanted to get everyone's feedback on the sub-themes before we go into the next breakout session. To me, they all look fine, and I think you've all done great work. I think what would be good from a program point of view, though, is to have more similarity in how you articulate the sub-themes. Some of you articulate them sort of more like the data track sub-themes, for example. link back to data. Some of you have different, so trust has different themes like cybersecurity and so on. I think for the program, it might be useful for us. We don't have to do it during this meeting, but to find more of a common way in terms of the phrasing and the way in which we describe the sub-themes. So I think before, please take the cue if you want to say anything. I just want you to look now, because numbers and percentages clearly has been challenging. So to start us on this, the Secretariat and I have prepared some very, very broad parameters. For me, I think a very important point of departure, which I haven't heard anyone actually say yet, is that we really should not be rejecting good proposals. I think for us as somebody who's been part of the IGF community for a long time, I think merging is a far better option than just being excluded. So I do think we shouldn't let numbers make us, or percentages or allocations. I think we should always be willing to find a way of giving really good proposals space in the IGF. I think that's an important point of departure. But I do understand that decisions have to be made and we have to have numbers. So what we've done as the Secretariat, we've come up with some very rough numbers. Louise, if you can just move up a little bit to the plenary section of the agenda. So what we've done here is to come up with a proposal which you should discuss. So what are the assumptions in this proposal? So we started from 2 assumptions with the total number of workshops. We are proposing that by the end of today, we come up with, or by the end of your breakout groups, we come up with no more than 80 and no fewer than 70, more or less. Excuse me. Why this number? This is because we had 65 last year, and I think 65 felt like a reasonable number. This year, we'll have a virtual IGF. Now, what we have found out from colleagues, Eurodig in particular, is that we are going to have a second round of vetting, because we are going to have to ask all the successful proposers to resubmit with a plan for how they are going to run their workshop virtually. And I think we should assume that, and I know this is more work for the MAG, but I don't think we can assume that we'll automatically accept everyone's proposals. So I think we need to factor in for some sessions that we feel just do not submit a good enough proposal for the online version of their workshop. So if 80 is too many, then let's make it 70. But we do need to factor that there will be some drop off in numbers when we do the second round of vetting. But if you feel that that's too many, let's discuss that. And then secondly, in terms of number of sessions per track, we at the Secretariat and myself, we feel that we shouldn't, that balance is not that important. It's much more important that we find space for the good quality proposals. So we're just proposing, and this is open to you for input, a minimum of 10 per thematic track and a maximum of 25. So any reactions to that? I see, Jutta, you've asked for the floor.
Yes, thank you, Henriette. Thank you for giving me the floor. Jutta Kroll, MAG member in my 3rd year for civil society from Germany. It's just a question whether I got that right. Do you suggest that all the workshop proposals that the MAG members will agree on to be in the green basket, that means above the threshold, that these go back to the workshop proposers and then they have to confirm that they have a concept to run the session that they had proposed at a virtual IGF. Is that correct?
That's exactly what I'm proposing. And I've looked into this, in quite a lot of depth and discussed it with Sandra and the Eurodig team. Because I think what we know is that, and we know this from this MAG meeting, I mean, Anya and Shengatai and Louise and I have really worked hard to prepare this agenda and this process. Online sessions require more preparation than face-to-face sessions. And I think for us as the MAG, it's very important to ensure that we've done everything within our power to make sure that the workshops are well managed and well run. So we might need other levels of technical support, but I think at this point, what I'm referring to is to ask those successful proposers to submit a short outline of how they are going to run this as a virtual process. And that could also be an opportunity to ask them to introduce other improvements that you might have noted in your evaluation of the sessions. So yes, the answer is yes to you, Jutta. Sylvia, you asked for the floor.
Thank you, Henriette. I have a question. Well, I mentioned before that I think all the groups worked based on quality, and I think that we kind of hit that nail. Having the number of 80 proposals sounds really, good. I was just wondering, based on the documents that were already submitted with the recommendations that each group has, if there is any number from the Secretariat in terms of how many we need to drop from the different groups. If in knowing that is, hold on, sorry, Henriette, knowing that on our case, on the trust group, that is the one that has more proposals submitted and more proposals for the recommendations. I just want to make sure that when we look at the overall program and we look at the balance and we look at all of that, that the scoring also reflects the quality of the proposals that we select. So if we have some help from the Secretariat to actually see those numbers, that might be very helpful for the discussion in case the trust group has to drop some, for example. So it will be really good because the trust group has put forward 35 proposals plus one for a merger. And according to that percentage, in that maximum of 25, we might need to drop 10. And I don't agree to that because all of those are over 4 score, so, or almost. So that's that. If it is absolutely impossible to fit them in, and etc., then fine. But if we go with the idea of putting quality over the numbers, then the quality is there, and I will do my best to protect those sessions to be included. So I would appreciate some guidelines from the Secretariat in terms of the numbers for each track. Thanks.
Thanks, Sylvia. Just, Carlos, I know you've asked for the floor, but can we just do that quickly? I don't think, Secretariat, or are you able to do that? But can I just ask each group? I know that for Trust, you had 36, correct? That you wanted to include.
Yes, but if you with your guideline of 25 means 11.
Let's just hang on, Sylvia. Let's just go through each group. Inclusion, what was your number?
We shortlisted 18 based on the assumption that we would have 18 slots, but we easily have 25 or more very good workshops. Okay, so if you move the threshold up, we can fill it easily.
Okay, and then environment, you had 14, or how many
14, did you? Exactly, yes.
14, and data?
Yeah, we selected 13. Our number was 12, and we added one more for the purpose of including some of the thematic gaps. So we had 13, but we can come back and finally easily find the ones additional that could be required.
Yeah. So it does look here as if we are not very far off from that number of of 80. I think, I mean, I'm not doing a very scientific count here, but if we apply the mergers, that probably brings us down to the desired number. And my sense is that environment and data, you are happy with your numbers. Inclusion, you would like to add more if you could. And trust, you don't want any change, or are there some you feel you can shed?
No, I do think the 36 were those that we wanted to have included due to the scores that they have achieved. And I would also like to remind, if we go for quality, then Trust made for the 5 best scoring proposals in the overall rank over all 4 tracks. So I don't think it's only quantity like the 98 that went into the Trust basket, but also the quality. Sorry for jumping in. I was just trying to answer your question.
Thanks. I count that we've got 81 on the table at the moment. So I think really, which is a lot, but we still need to then add the mergers, and then we need to look at how to do the second round of vetting. But Carlos, let me give you the floor before we continue.
Thank you. We have to turn on the camera, right? Okay. I have one comment and one question. The comment is, if we remove the physical constraint component, which is the case because IGF will be virtual, and if we stretch the whole meeting to 2 weeks, I think we'll have more flexibility regarding the number of workshops. Am I right? And this is a comment and of course a question as well. And the second is, if we go for a second round of vetting to check whether the online version of the approved workshops is acceptable, what are the criteria we are going to use to decide on these proposals? Because I don't think we have criteria for the online format yet, do we? These are my comments and questions. Thank you.
Carlos, we don't. And I don't think we've really had time to do that, but at the same time, I think we can get that together relatively easily. And I think, I mean, as the workshop evaluation group has done so much work already, if you would like, then the Secretariat and myself can do the first attempt at that and then give it to you for comment. But no, we don't have that yet. We do have to develop that. Ben, you have the floor.
Thanks. Yes, video started. So thank you for giving us some guidance about aiming for 80. And I wonder whether, and we are close, as you say, to clarify that with Trust, the merger isn't really an issue here because it's something which is not in our 36 we propose could be merged with one that is in our 36. So it wouldn't, it doesn't take the number down from 36. It's a 37th workshop that would be incorporated if the other workshop agrees to the merger. But my suggestion was going to be that one way to work out how many slots we should have is to look at the proportion of proposals received per track. And so that would probably suggest that a few would be lost from Trust, maybe going down to 33, and that a few would be added to Inclusion. I think I didn't have enough time to do the maths and to work out, but that could be one way of working out how to adjust the recommendations we have without too many changes at this point.
I think indeed you can do that. I was going to suggest that when you go into your breakout, that Trust, because you've got the highest number, that you do look at your list again to see if there are some that you feel you can do without, and Inclusion, that you go and look at your list and put some back that you felt really do deserve to be to be in. I think with the other two tracks, we are dealing with small numbers. We don't really want to lose workshops there. Not if you feel that you've got the quality that we are looking for. And I also wonder if you would be willing in your breakout groups now, because I don't think the number discussions is going to be so time consuming because you've done all the preparation. But if you have time in your breakout groups to start coming up with some points that you feel we should include in the vetting process for online presentation. That could be something. If I look now, if we look at the tasks, Louise, if you can just scroll down a little bit. For this breakout group, if you look at the column there, we have what we felt should be the output of your breakout groups. List of approved workshops. You're very close to achieving that. Sub-themes, you're very close to achieving that, although I would like a bit more discussion on that, but we can always come back to that. Proposals for mergers, you've done that. And I haven't heard any dissent around that except for the data tracks proposal to ask high scoring workshops to merge. And I think Maria Paz, you've heard the sentiment there. So you and your group just need to take that on board. And then here we have other recommendations, workshop for becoming a main session. We've got one proposal so far. And I think what I want to suggest is that we discuss that proposal tomorrow when we look at main sessions. And then here I have optional preferences, ideas for a virtual IGF. So I think, you could also start talking about the criteria for vetting, but it might be more useful to talk about general preferences. I'm going to leave that to the facilitators to put to your group. And you can decide whether you want to discuss preferences for virtual IGF in terms of time and shape, or if you want to talk about vetting, about criteria that we want to use to evaluate whether we believe this will be a successful online session. And if we get a bit of both, that's good. We can work with that. I'm concerned about time. We've run over time, but I think we needed to run it over time with this plenary. And I suspect that your breakout sessions probably won't be very long because you've done so much preparatory work. So on this, do you feel, are there any more points on this? Are people comfortable with this approach to the breakout sessions? Are there questions for clarity or suggestions about how to approach these sessions? I'm not watching the chat. I'm relying on you all to speak. So please say it out loud.
It's Ben Wallace again, Henriette. Just
Go
to note
ahead.
something I did put in the chat, which you can't see. I took so when the Secretariat shared with us statistics about all of the workshops a few weeks ago, slide number 2 contained the breakdown per track. It was 41% for trust, 21% for data, 8% for environment, and 30% for inclusion. So I took the number of 80 workshops and did the percentages for each. So that would mean trust would have to come down to 33, inclusion would go to 24, it would be 17 data and 6 environment. So I know that's maybe a crude way of doing something, but that might be a target for us to aim for within our evaluation groups.
I would just, with environment, I wouldn't, my suggestion would be not to go down to 6. I think this is a new track. We need time to work with it. I think if we only have a program, if we have a program with only 6 workshops in the environment track, that could, I think, reflect negatively on on the kind of start that we want to give to this track. So, I'm happy with the larger number that the group have come up with, provided they feel those are good proposals. Jutta.
Yes, I have a question with regard to the numbers. Do we expect to accommodate 80 workshops into the program? Or do you assume that out of these 80 that we accept now, some will drop out just because they do not feel up to organize a virtual session? So the question is whether we would need maybe 90 to then come down to 80 with the dropouts who do not feel up to the task? Or do we assume we suggest 80 and then we will have a dropout rate of 10 and we end up with 70? That needs to be clarified.
I'll try and clarify that. And Shangatai, please jump in here as well. We felt that we don't really want more than 80 because 80 is a lot, and there is a concern about the IGF not being too big. Last year we had 65, but that was for 3 tracks. So I thought a 4th track, a ceiling of 80 seems reasonable. I don't think we should go higher than that. So I don't think we should decide on that number if we can't accommodate that, because there is still the possibility that all the workshop proposals will come up with strong plans for running it online. But I think we will probably lose some, but we don't want to lose too many. So Jutta, I hope that's clarified. You know, I think so what we're working with here is a target number, a final target of something between 80 and 70. But Shangatai, can you jump in here and add a little bit in terms of how we approach this when we prepared for the meeting?
Thank you very much, Henriette. No, that's very true. We do suppose that when you do select the 80, there will of course be some droppage, and it will come down to almost around 70. So that would be a good number to work with. I don't think I have anything else to add as such, but just to underscore what Henriette said about the environment track, that we do have to as well encourage that track. So I would give it a little bit more workshop space than it would ordinarily have received if we just go strictly by percentages.
Thanks, Shangatai. Tamaya.
Thank you for that. I'll try to be brief. I just wanted to offer a possible solution to this, because try as we might, we can assume how many people will drop out, but we don't know. If it is possible for each group to think about how many sessions they would have in terms of the numbers that we all agree on for their track, and then identify maybe, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 more that we just keep in the back, you know, as people do with I don't know, college applications. We put those on the wait list, and if somebody decides not to take their place or drop out from having that session that they were selected to have for whatever reason, then we lift up in their order the backup sessions. Perhaps that would be something that we can do, and we already have the green and yellow baskets to do that, so that might not be that difficult. But I'd rather keep the session numbers low first, and then bring in if we need to, if somebody drops out, then have a large number of sessions, and then hope that somebody drops out, so we have a manageable program.
So sorry, I have one more thing to say, if it's okay, Henriette. Henriette?
Yes, sorry, I was unmuting. Of course, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. So Tatema just reminded me as well. So I think also we shouldn't just think about having the maximum number of workshops. We should also think about that stream. Do these workshops, you know, make a logical flow? And let's say you choose, I mean, just picking a number, if you choose 20 workshops, do they make a logical stream? Or can you do it in 18 and those 2 that you tack on disrupt that flow? Then of course you can drop those. But if you need, you know, 1 or 2 extra more to make that stream, then fine, yes. So it shouldn't be thinking of absolute numbers as such, but yes, please do try and stick to those guidelines of the numbers. Yeah.
Thanks, Shangatai. Thanks, Timea. Timea, I don't think your proposal is mutually exclusive with what we have come up with. I think that the total number we can accommodate is also going to be determined by the design of the event. And we just haven't had the time to decide that now. So, and I don't want you to, I want this work that you've done on the workshops for you to complete it. We might have to make adjustments at a later stage, but I think this target figure of no more than 80 at this point, with the kind of distribution that we've come up with, seems, I think, fair. At this point, I think if you want to keep a reserve list, as Timea has suggested, I think absolutely do that. If you feel there are workshops that are worthy of being on that reserve list. So we now need to break out. I'm sure you need a break before you start your breakout groups. The original plan was that we were supposed to start these breakout groups at an hour ago. So we've actually gone an hour over time, but I think we needed to do that. We then allocated quite a lot of time for the breakout groups. And we were going to ask you all to come back to a plenary today, just for us to identify next steps. So what I'm proposing is that we cancel that we don't have a plenary, that you now break out into all your groups, and then the facilitators can decide how long you want to go on, how long of a break you want to give one another before you start working, or whether you want to jump in immediately. And then we'll come back tomorrow and listen to your reports. Is that clear? Does anyone have any questions about the process? Just jump in and don't worry about taking the floor. Does anyone, all the facilitators, are you clear on what will happen now?
Hello,
Hello.
Luis, go ahead.
No, just technical question. So if we don't have the last session, we will still have the breakout, but they return to the main session. So basically we will keep the main session open. We will put a maximum time of 90 minutes. And we'll keep that time, the session open, and then after 90 minutes, we will close the main session, meaning that there will be a maximum of 90 minutes for the meetings now. Is that okay with the mic?
That's absolutely fine. You'll have 90 minutes and you can decide how much of that you need. I'll stay around and I'll move from room to room in case you need to check in with me on anything. But it's up to you how to organize your breakout groups at this point.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead, Mary.
I missed some part of your explanation, and on the other hand, I wanted to know: are we going on to the 90 minutes now?
Yes.
We're already having Zoom fever. I'm already having Zoom fever. I don't know whether we are going to go to 90 minutes now and come back to the main room.
Well, we can. Would you prefer for us to give you, we can easily do that. We can give everyone a break before we open the rooms, as long as you all do come back. Is there a preference for that? For us scheduling the break now, instead of allowing the facilitators to schedule the break? Can I hear the facilitators?
Should be done in the groups, so the facilitators should decide with their members. It's easier to agree in a smaller group.
Okay, good. So Mary, there will be breaks, but first go into your room, then your facilitator will talk with you about how to give you a break. And absolutely, I agree with you, there's Zoom fatigue. I think people do need a break, but let's let the facilitators discuss that with their groups. I don't see any other question.
Fast and last clarification. So the rooms will be open for 90 minutes. You can include your own breaks there. And then you are free at any time to leave the rooms, the breakout rooms or the main room. I mean, you can return to the main room, but there will be nothing. And then after 90 minutes, everything will be over. So you can leave anything at any time, okay? If you need any help, I will be in the main room. And you can also call me from the breakout rooms. So it's not a problem during these 90 minutes.
Thanks
that's
very much,
Paul Rowney here.
Yes, Paul.
Can I just ask a question? Are we able to share our own documents in the breakout groups?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You are. You can share screens in your breakout groups. So thanks very much, everyone. I apologize for us continuing for longer than scheduled, but I think we needed to have this discussion. It was a complex session, but we did need to have this discussion. Thanks very much for the groups, for all your preparatory work. I think it's going to make the breakout session much faster. And thanks to all our observers, thanks to the captioner who will now stop working, and thanks also to the Secretariat. And please, everyone, you are going to be assigned by Louise to your workshop evaluation breakout group now. Your facilitator will set a break with you and agree on your work modalities. You've all got rapporteurs. Thanks for all the volunteers who volunteered for this. And we'll get back tomorrow at our meeting, which starts at what time? When is our plenary? Tomorrow. I'm getting my other device out. Secretariat, when do we start tomorrow?
1 o'clock UTC.
1 o'clock. So 1 o'clock UTC.
Yes, that is correct. Sorry, I have to unmute.
Thanks, Shangatai. Thanks,
That is
Shangatai.
correct.
So thanks very much, everyone. I'm closing this plenary and I look forward to dropping in on the breakout rooms and to meeting you all again tomorrow.
Thank you, Henriette.
Yes, thank you very much, Henriette.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Henriette.
Thank you, Henriette. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
And thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.